Good afternoon, KBOI. This is Dylan Stalker, your multi-generational Idahoan, The Great Idaho Show. As we open this up, do not forget Old Arms of Idaho. They, too, are great about Idaho. Old Arms of Idaho, your firearms, Western, and military specialists. Don't think about just the gun. Think about everything related. The swords, the knives, the bayonets, the reloading, the books, you name it. If it's related, they are the experts. oldarmsofidaho.com, and give them a shout. Today, we are carrying on the Sheriffs series. We've talked to quite a few sheriffs. I intend to speak to all 44 sheriffs across Idaho. It is my personal belief that the sheriff is one of the most closely connected people of your community and has a good ear for what's going on. That's what this is about. Today, we're talking to somebody that is very closely related to all the sheriffs. We're talking to Jeff Lavey, the executive director of the Idaho Sheriffs Association. Jeff, welcome to the program this afternoon.
Thank you for inviting me, Dylan.
Yeah, thank you very much. Jeff and I have had quite a few words together as this sheriff series has wrapped up because he's assisted me in reaching out to sheriffs and certainly some conversations that have come up about what's going on and what the issues are. And I think today we're going to get into 4 segments of what Jeff had mentioned to me that seems to be the 4 top issues. And those would be jail funding across all the counties, the analog 911 system versus what the NetGen or NextGen 911 system, how that's working out, state inmates in county jails, and then the state and out-of-state absconders. How do we go get these people from other states, and who's paying for that? So, Jeff, if we're going to open right up, I give you the floor, sir. We're going to talk about jail funding.
Well, thanks, Dylan. What we're doing right now is we're meeting with the sheriffs. In fact, we're meeting right after this program today.
Sure.
Well, it's being taped.
Yeah. So you're a busy man,
I'm
we'll say.
A few days ahead of schedule.
Yep.
But we're talking about legislative issues and some of our priorities for this next legislative session.
Yeah.
Because that's one of the things that we do at the association is we lobby for the sheriffs. And so we're going to be having this discussion today on those 4 topics and probably many more.
Yeah.
But what's kind of important to discuss, and I really think that the public needs to be aware of it and just kind of educate them on it, is the statutorily, the sheriffs are required to run the jail.
Sure.
Statutorily, the county commissioners are required to provide the funding for that jail. And so every county in Idaho is required to have some sort of holding facility for inmates. Well, we only have 35 jails, and we have 44 counties. So they actually contract with other jails to house their inmates because the facilities that they have are inadequate. In fact, we're getting ready to lose another jail just this week. Latah County is going to start holding only inmates for court purposes, and then they're going to transfer all of their inmates to Nez Perce and Lewiston.
That's Moscow.
That's Moscow,
correct?
That is
That's
Moscow.
A very populated area that you would think had the ability to fund a jail.
Yeah, it is. But, the thing is, when I started my career in the Pullman area, which is just across the border of Idaho,
Sure.
And the jail in Latah County is pretty similar to what it was 35 years ago when I was working over there. There's not been a lot of changes to it. And I think you and I were kind of discussing I think it was Latah County where we were discussing the appearance of city facilities versus county facilities. It's a very old facility. And so they have done the right thing and said, we can't house prisoners anymore if we can't make the improvements that are needed. And so that's what they're doing.
Can I throw a thought out there on that?
Yeah.
Because this is about the county. Of course, my motivations, I'm like, why am I saying it? But, the county, as the people, the taxpayers, bear the risk of the failure of that jail operating correctly in a lawsuit or in the risk of that jail. Is that a fair thing to say?
I think it is a fair thing to say. If you go back and look at some of the counties in this state and other states, is ACLU will actually start coming after some of the jails because of, we got to provide, facilities that are safe and that are comfortable, and hot food, hot water, proper heating and air and all those sort of things. And
that's the right thing to do, right?
And it's the right thing to do. It's the right thing to do for human beings, regardless of that situation that you're in.
Sure.
And so when we can't do that, or if we refuse to do that, then we do open ourselves up for potential liability.
Sure.
You've seen right now the current method to build a new facility is to either pay cash, which nobody has enough money in
counties. Where's the money in these counties?
Nobody does.
The counties are the most budget-strong organization in all of government, I would think.
There's not a single county in this state, from Ada all the way to the smallest, that would have the ability to fund a brand new jail or a courthouse today. So the only other alternative that we currently have is to go out to bond. And when you go out to bond, it requires a supermajority vote of the citizens, which I think is fair that the citizens should decide whether they want to tax themselves for this facility or not. But the 64% that's needed, it's hard to get.
I mean,
because nobody
County has tried recently.
Nobody wants to raise their taxes. Sure. I get that. Canyon County has tried it 4 times without success.
Yep.
Ada County tried it 1 time. They got more yes votes than no votes, but they were 1 vote shy of the majority, so it failed. And then there's if you've seen it in the news lately, there's Payette County that actually has just released that they're going to go out to bond on a jail. Now, I don't know how successful they're going to be. I think they're hoping that they're successful, but regardless of whether they're successful or not, they have to do this because this is the only way that they can fund it. They do need a new facility, and they need to show that they're actually trying. And
it's a rock and a hard place scenario because constitutionally it is legislated that this is to happen. And so you must try. And then where's the tools?
Yes.
Hearing Sam Holst say that it's as worst as he's ever seen it as relation to the communication between legislature and the sheriffs was a concern, but where does it go from here?
Well, part of that is, and I understand the frustrations, but I have to be the level-headed person with the group, and so
I agree.
I share with them. I said, I understand your frustrations, but what we need to do is we need to sit down and meet with the people, the legislators, the speaker, and others. And if we either refuse to do that or don't do that, then shame on us, because we have to show what our concerns are, what we're trying to do. We need to listen to them, and maybe we can work collaboratively to come up with a solution. One of the solutions they've had in the past is the local tax option, and in the past it's been on the books, and then it had a sunset clause in it where after a certain many years it went away. And I believe that I think it was Nez Perce and maybe it was Kootenai County that actually were able to take advantage of that before it sunsetted. Well, now no one can do that because it's sunsetted and that's not an option anymore. And really what that comes down to is putting it to a citizen vote that says, we agree to tax ourselves to build this facility or whatever you decide to do. And it's still open to the citizens. The nice thing about the local tax option is that it's spread across everybody that does business in that community.
Yeah, whether you live there or
not. And so we're making some headways in there. I do know that some of the barriers we faced in the past are lowering. I do know that there are several options out there that are going to be discussed this session. And I do know that there's still some differences of opinion on how it should look, but that's how all good legislation comes.
Yeah, right.
We get in a room, we talk about it, it's like making sausage, and we find out what works. Some of the rumors I'm hearing is that they want it to be a constitutional amendment, and I'm reluctant on that for 2 reasons. One is I don't believe we should be making a constitutional amendment for just every single thing that pops up. And I don't believe it's necessary on this situation because you're already going to open up to citizens for a vote. That will not happen unless the citizens say, we agree to tax ourselves. So it's already going out to 1 vote.
Sure.
So why do we need to have a constitutional amendment to say, yeah, it's okay to do this, and then we do another vote that says, now, okay, you can do this. And so I just, And maybe there's a reason why that's important. That goes back to what we talked about before. It's probably one of the reasons why we should sit down and talk with some of the leaders to see where they're coming from. They can see where we're coming from and see if we can come up with something that works for us.
Well, so I'm just a citizen, right? And I'm thinking about it like, okay, the state does this to counties often too, and for other things, but the state says some sort of mandate. The sheriff is a mandate. The jail is a mandate, essentially. But you go figure it out, right? It doesn't give the jails or the sheriffs or the counties the abilities to necessarily do it, but it all boils down to tax. It always boils down to money. I respect the legislator for cutting that down. They are working on that. I respect that. We're going to go into this next segment, maybe carry this on a little bit more, talk about 911 and the systems that are a little old, I hear. This is Dylan Stalker, The Great Idaho Show. Don't forget Old Arms of Idaho. We will be right back. Thank you very much. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. This is The Great Idaho Show. I'm Dylan Stalker, sitting down with Jeff Lavey, the Executive Director of the Idaho Sheriffs Association. This is the Sheriff's Series. I'm really appreciative of Jeff sitting with us today because each county sheriff has a different perspective because every county is different. But when you are a person that is working to guide all the sheriffs as a whole for a universal success, that is the position of Jeff, and I value that opinion greatly. We were just talking about jail funding, the struggles. I'll just make one point because you mentioned Latah County. Right when you pull into that beautiful town of Moscow, there is a city police building that is brand new and quite clearly well-funded. You can look it up, and then you go to the sheriff's office and you see what's there. There's quite a difference there. So it seems like there's some challenges in funding. Of course, with the jails, you have, like you mentioned, Ada County, Canyon County, and trying to get the funding and other counties losing. So where would you like to finish up in that part of it, Jeff?
Well, I kind of think that discussion we had kind of segues into the next thing we're going to talk about on funding. And it really just comes down to educating everybody out there as far as what we're facing, and then deciding how we go about doing it. Okay. I think we all believe on jails that there is necessary people that should be in jail.
Absolutely.
But we currently have jails that have to meet with the prosecutor and the judge every single day and say, which is the best of the worst that we're going to let out today, because we have no place to house them. And that's what we're doing.
What a risky decision. Because the best of the worst is a sleeper cell in a crime scenario. What a tough triage in criminality.
We don't have a crystal ball, so we just hope that we get it right.
Right. So I personally believe that the motivation, generally speaking, across the sheriffs and all policing for that matter, is of a positive motivation. But
no, it's not. It's not.
So, okay. Well, moving on from jail funding, you had suggested that there might be some concerns with the analog 911 system. What's going on out there?
Well, you've probably seen this in the media lately about going to Next Gen 911. And most everybody's probably going, well, why do we need to do that? And what's the purpose? And so I think our discussion here today is kind of educate people about what's going on. So when you hear Next Gen 911 or Next Generation 911, sure, it makes it sound like it's something new. But it's not new. It's 20 years old. We've had states that have adopted this technology 20 years ago, and Idaho still hasn't done it. So now we're getting into a point where we're in a crisis situation where we have analog trunk systems. Let me first say I am by no means an expert in this, and so I only know the overview knowledge of what's going on. But the analog system has phone lines that go in the ground. And Copper wire. Yep. And first of all, they're not supported anymore by the phone industries. And second, they're failing. And that is what is operating our 911 systems. You call 911, it goes through those systems, it goes to the center. We've had 140 documented failures in 911 systems for the last couple of years. In fact, we just had one last week in Owyhee County. we can't risk that. We
Will you
can't miss
describe
even
that
one.
real quick? The failure itself. Someone calls 911. Doodle-doo. Like, what does that look like?
The one thing that, a couple different things. One is you call 911 and no one answers.
Sure.
Or you call 911 and you're on hold forever. Or you call 911 and then nobody knows where you're at. So those are all factors that we deal with. In Owyhee County, I believe the sheriff said that their problem was they were getting ghost 911 calls. And so the phone kept ringing 911, 911, 911. The problem with that is they weren't real emergencies, but it tied up all the lines and tied up the operators that were not available to actually answer the actual real emergencies. And so that's what their situation was. So we're having stuff like that all the time where calls aren't getting through or you're put on hold forever. There's another issue out there. I live in way out county, Boise County. Yep.
And Cambridge Telephone just came through and put fiber everywhere, which essentially deleted the 911 system. So now there's a battery backup. You used to have a 502 phone that you could always, if the power was out, you could always make a phone call, right? Because you got power through that copper. Now there's a battery pack associated to that, and if your power goes down or if something happens to that, your 911 is hanging on the balance of a battery and a different technology. So I'm just throwing that out there as another issue.
And that's where it comes down to proper maintenance and stuff too. Is that you're going to have to make sure that you do proper maintenance because batteries don't last forever.
Sure,
and they do run out. On this next gen 911 system, it gets rid of those trunk lines. It goes to fiber and it goes through, everything is digitized. And then some of the larger counties currently have it where you have like text to 911 and things like that. So the next gen 911 would bring those sort of technologies to everybody in the state, but also it tracks where you're at. And so when you're calling on the phone, every 15 seconds, it updates where you're at. And if you can't tell someone where you're at, we can find out where you're at. Right now, the way that we have to do that is triangulate that call through cell towers or other towers.
Which isn't a speedy thing.
It's not a speedy thing, and it takes a while.
Right.
And it's not completely accurate.
Sure.
So there's all sorts of reasons why it actually makes sense to go to that. Really kind of goes down to funding again. What I was going to say is that even if they make changes with the legislator and even provide a funding source for that change at that point in time, we're finding that we're going by decades before that rate is ever increased. And so one of the perfect examples is that we decided a long time ago is that, and I think this was early 80s, that you could charge up to $1 per phone line for 911.
Okay.
And
the Bell system's tremendously regulated. That's an easy thing to get into the billing system.
And that went to the voters, or to the counties, and they decided to. And I think you had an option; it was up to $1. It didn't have to be $1. A long time after that, legislator came up with a 25 cents additional that a county could opt into. And if you opted into that 25 cents per phone line went to a state grant fund. And that fund would then be used to fund different 911 centers across the state. You could have some sort of project that you wanted to implement. Usually it's an upgrade to your system. You could apply for that grant and they'd review it. And then if they had the money, they could then fund your project. Well, none of those rates have increased for decades. And so
not even CPI. I mean, just look at the basic CPI.
And you look at the inflation and everything else that we just haven't kept up. And so there's not enough money to run, maintain, and upgrade all the systems across the state of Idaho. So we're in a process of trying to work together to come up with the funding for the next gen 911 through that grant process. But it was an optional thing where not all counties opted in. And at one point in time, I think there were 6 that didn't opt in. And then as recently as a month or 2 ago, we were down to 2 counties, and now we're down to 1 county that doesn't participate in that. So we don't have as much money in that fund as.
But you're also having people completely delete the telephone service altogether and are going, like right now, Verizon will supply within a cellular area your cell phone and all your internet and everything. The telephone line itself is getting under pressure, so there's a decrease in funding through that system itself.
So each phone line, whether it's a hard line or a cell phone line, is charged that dollar fee.
The cell phones do then. Okay.
But the problem that we run into is on the cell phones is we thought it used to be tracked by area code, but it's not. It's tracked by mailing address. And so based upon that subscriber's mailing address, that's where the dollar goes to that jurisdiction. Okay. But we're finding now that a lot of people are into this online pay or automatic pay, and they don't go in and make the changes. So if you're in a different state and you move to Idaho, but you don't make any of those changes with your phone system, that money could very well be going to that state and not to the state that you're now residing in. We don't know that and there's no mechanism to audit that. So we've been put I shouldn't say a lot of pressure, but we've been suggesting to our congressional leadership that this is probably going to be a federal fix, not a state fix, because we need to make sure that the money that we are collecting is going to the jurisdiction for which it's supposed to be going to. But we're in a situation where there's just not enough money to do what needs to be done. So the last couple of years, we've been trying to increase that grant fund from 25 cents to $1.
Yeah.
And we've not had much luck with that. We have to deal with all the phone companies. We have to deal with all the wireless phone companies. Yeah. We also have to convince the legislators that it's the right thing to do. We haven't made any changes to this since the 80s. It's time that we need to do something. Well,
I think it's out there. The sheriffs are under tremendous pressure. Counties, for that matter, the small population counties, are under tremendous pressure. It sounds like there's been some proactive communication to the legislature. Hopefully, through this process, the sides can come together and decide how are we going to move forward this policing with the rampant growth in Idaho. We're going to move into next segment. We're going to talk about state inmates in county jails. There's some things going on with that. This is Dylan Stalker, The Great Idaho Show, and we're talking to Jeff Lavey of the Idaho Sheriffs Association. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. This is Dylan Stalker, multi-generational Idahoan, The Great Idaho Show. As always, these radio things don't happen for free. Our sponsor is Old Arms of Idaho. You know it. They are your firearms, Western and military collectible specialists. You're a state specialist. If you've got a bunch of firearms, they don't charge to tell you what you got and what they're worth and how you can even sell them yourselves. It's not just all about the money. It's just about how to get them resolved. oldarmsofidaho.com, your ambassadors to America's heritage and the 24-hour gun show. Jeff Lavey is who we're speaking to, the executive director of the Idaho Sheriffs Association. In the previous segments, we talked about jail funding, the analog 911 system. You can hear this entire conversation at thegreatidahoshow.com anytime. Jeff, you had suggested that you would like to maybe communicate about the status of the state and the fact that they put inmates into the county jail system. What's going on with that scenario?
Well, Dylan, before we get to that, I just want to step back in that last conversation we had.
Let's do whatever. This is a platform for you, my friend.
And just share that, as we worked through the legislature this last couple of years, and we really had to educate them about why this is important.
Yeah.
We actually got some traction in getting them to agree to do an evaluation. They have a program, they have a system in place where they actually do a professional evaluation of the system. Can look at the pros and cons, what the current situation is, what the future situation is, and the legislators leadership committed to that. And they're in the process of doing that right now with a deadline, I believe, of December 1. And they want to have that report in place, ready to go for the legislative session in start of 2026.
We got some stuff going.
So
forward.
we are making some traction.
Sure.
Unfortunately, this is such an important thing that we can't drag this out much longer. We can't risk it. It's a life safety factor, and there's a lot of rural places in Idaho, and we need to make sure that the proper systems are in place and that they're working.
So in government provides a service, and people think of roads and fire and all of that stuff. I will say this, my opinion, the reason why I'm doing this, Idaho is growing tremendously quickly. And if we're going to have a policing system, I support the sheriff, because the sheriff themselves are elected and bound by the Constitution. And I can't think of any better basis to move forward with that. So there is some budget concerns with the sheriffs, and hopefully the communication, especially as we lead into the next legislative session, can come together and recognize that moving forward, it doesn't need to take a giant disaster in order to come back and fix the problem.
Yeah, Dylan, it really, truly amazes me as how much the counties can accomplish with such limited amount of resources that they have. But there's a breaking point there too.
Sure.
And we have to find where that balance is.
The county of all governments are certainly some of the most, I guess, there's responsibility in there, but man, talk about frugal. You gotta keep it tight. And the poor county clerk in every county, they
do some amazing things.
Oh my goodness gracious.
They do some amazing things.
Okay. So the floor is yours, sir.
So we're going to talk about state inmates and just kind of educate little people of how this thing works. So if you're arrested in a jurisdiction, you are held in a county jail, and you are the county's responsibility up until the point that you have a trial or you plead guilty and you're sentenced. Once you're sentenced, you became a inmate of the state. Okay. You're now the state's property or the state's problem or the state's responsibility, however you want to look at it. So currently there's a funding mechanism in place that says that state inmates in county facilities, we will pay the counties $55 a day for the first 7 days. And after that, we'll pay the counties $75 a day that they remain in a county jail.
Okay.
And I believe, and it never used to be tiered like that. It used to be just like a one fee. And I believe they tiered it to make it an incentive to get the inmate out of the county jail and into the state system as soon as you can. Makes absolutely perfect sense to me. However, a couple of things have happened. One is there's not enough prison space. So they stay.
Prisons in Idaho are full.
So they stay in the jails longer, and then the cost of housing an inmate is so much more expensive now. And it really goes back to what I mentioned on the other two things: is that we put legislation in place, but we never update it. And so in the current statute, it says every 3 years, the legislator must look at the funding that is on the books for paying for state inmates in county facilities. That 3-year mark was last year. So I went to the chairman of the judiciary committees, who we work with, and said that we're not prepared to go at this year, but you need to get this on your radar. We need to take a look at this because we do need to increase the funding. But furthermore, we also need to get those state inmates out of county jails. The problem is that we have nowhere to put them. And so I don't know if many people know this, but we are currently housing prisoners out of the state of Idaho in Arizona. Okay. And I believe we pay them $87 a day to house our prisoners in Arizona.
How much does it cost average to keep a prisoner in a county jail?
So right now, what we have done is we have to take, because the fixed costs are the same. and they only increase with the more inmates that you have. But your cost of your building's the same, the cost of your equipment is the same,
Sure.
your personnel, and so we make those adjustments every year. Currently, when you take everybody, all the jails in Idaho, and you factor in all those equations, it costs almost $140 a day to house an inmate in a county jail.
So if the state's paying $75 and it costs nearly twice as much to house it, who's paying for that difference?
The residents of that county.
Okay. I think that's a very fair thing for the residents to be aware of, because when you have counties that have, it's the small counties too that are dealing with that issue. It seems like a very valid problem for you to discuss.
Here the other thing is that, and I don't like to talk about this too much, but its reality is that we have, at the Sheriffs Association, we have a jail inspection that we do every year. It's voluntary, but we do it for every sheriff that has a jail in this state asks us to go in and do a jail inspection. There's about 80 pages of standards that we look at as far as staffing and floor space and food and all those dietary needs, all those things.
Sure.
Well, I will tell you that 14 jails failed their jail inspection this past year because of overcrowding. 11 of those jails failed their inspection because they had too many state inmates in their facility.
Okay.
So we need to, frankly, we need more prison space. And
it just kind of, it's what's building, right? Because there's also other things that we're not even talking about, which is the vehicle radio system and the relays in some counties are broken. I mean, it goes deeper and deeper, but one small bit of problem plus another small bit of problem plus another small bit of problem means that
it just adds.
The sheriffs are stretching out to the counties and some underfunding issues.
Well, and there's only a certain amount of money,
right?
And you can only slice it so many ways. And when you have, I face this even on the city side. It's like everybody is trying to fulfill their mission. Everybody needs additional funding because you just said it, the state is growing at a tremendous rate.
Yeah.
There's just not enough money to go around. And then you're forced to prioritize. And then which means that someone's going to get it and someone's not.
Sure.
And so every year we go, it just gets worse and worse. And so we need, and I will say this is that in the past we didn't have much luck with communication with the IDOC, the Department of Corrections Director. The new director, Director Derrick, she's only been in there for a short amount of time, but she is working collaboratively with our sheriffs to try to solve this issue.
Aren't state prisons private? Isn't there something weird going on there?
No. So, we tried that experiment here in Idaho. Is that we went and we did have a private prison, and we had nothing but problems with it. And so the state took back control of it. So every prison in Idaho is a public funded prison.
Okay.
The prison, though, that we do send the inmates to in Arizona is private. It's not publicly funded.
If we're having to send our inmates to other states, that's just that, you have a leak in the boat.
We need more space.
Right.
We need more space. And then for us here on the sheriff's side, it gets even more challenging is because half our sheriffs don't want the state inmates in their facilities. Half the sheriffs do because they do get some funding. They would like to get more funding. But they get some funding, which then helps with all these other areas where we're lacking funding in. So, we just can't say, okay, kick every state prisoner out of the county jails. Then that creates a problem for us too.
Sure.
So that it's been encouraging that the IDOC director has been meeting with us, and we've been discussing how to ensure that state inmates, that there's no room for them in the state level. Maybe there's room where we can transfer them to some other county that does want them to free up. If there's open bed spaces in eastern Idaho, maybe Ada County can send some of their people to eastern Idaho until there's a space open in the state facility. And so we're working on a computer program to kind of keep track of that and stuff. And so we're actually trying to solve the problem. But in the meantime, we do have to increase the funding source because it's costing us a lot more.
I mean, there's one other solution that's, I mean, I think it's fairly obvious. I mean, you guys should just inspire less crime out there, you know?
It's you're going to have all sorts of people that have all sorts of opinion, and they're going to say that if you don't arrest everybody for marijuana, then the jails wouldn't be full.
Yeah, true, right?
You know,
like I'm full. Like we don't need marijuana in Idaho.
Yeah,
you know, like it's tough.
You know, I get all those, but you just have to look at the true facts and say, why are we putting people in facilities? And then just ask yourself, do I want that person walking on the streets?
Yeah, you've got, and like you were saying earlier, it's a matter of criminal triage, right? Whereas
it is.
We want to get the hardbound baddies in the place that they need to be. But you might have more hardbound baddies than you can store today.
Well, and then, you know, this opens up a whole nother segment, and we don't need to talk about this today, but for those of you that don't put into jail or into prison, probably going to need something to hold them accountable to change their ways. Sure. Well, we're not funding that either. And so when we start to see some of those mental health issues and some of that, we're just not providing enough funding and help in that arena either.
Well, okay. So we're speaking to Jeff Lavey, the executive director of the Idaho Sheriffs Association. This is the Great Idaho Show, thegreatidahoshow.com. You can listen to this conversation 24 hours a day and forever going forward, because this is a real subject in Idaho. And I hope that if any part of this project for the Sheriff Series of the Great Idaho Show came together, I hope it inspires at least a healthy communication between the sheriffs, the representatives of the sheriffs as a whole to the Idaho legislature, because I don't want us to get to a situation where we have a catastrophe in order to get to a solution. So we'll be right back in our next segment, and we'll talk about some out-of-state issues of getting people back from things that they did that moved elsewhere. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. I say this a lot. Can we get back to ladies and gentlemen, please? Can we get back to communication versus confrontation? I think that's what's happening here with the sheriffs. This is the Sheriff Series, just trying to communicate some real world things that are happening here in Idaho, as it is a state in the Constitution that we have sheriffs. It's in the Constitution that we have jails. It's in the Constitution that we have safety systems. But if we aren't able to fund them properly, then what do we end up with as a result? Hopefully not a future disaster. We're speaking to Jeff Lavey, the executive director of the Idaho Sheriffs Association. And Jeff, you brought up a scenario that I hadn't heard of before. So we're talking about the word absconders. What are you talking about?
So, Dylan, this is an interesting topic. Even I had a couple of years ago, this came in front of us as a proposal for a new bill legislation.
Sure.
And I had to ask the same question: what are we talking about here? And had to educate myself on really what this was. And in 2024, we put together a bill that would basically say that any state inmate that doesn't follow whatever rules that they're supposed to when they're let out of jail, because they have probation officers that supervised. If they abscond or they leave the state puts out a warrant for them and wants them to return back to the state so we can hold them accountable.
Sure.
Now, when the state does that, guess who gets the bill?
Me?
The county the county sheriff.
The county sheriff, yeah.
So, as we were talking about earlier in this statement or in this segment, when a person goes through the process, they're responsible to the county up until the point where they're sentenced. And then once they're sentenced, they become a state inmate.
Yeah.
And so once they become a state inmate, if they don't follow the rules that the state imposes on them, then the warrant is put out for their arrest, but then the county then has to pick up the tab to go get them. And we always have to send 2 people because you have to have 2
witnesses
people.
and backup.
And so you have 2 people that their salaries, which we pay anyway, so that's not really the biggest factor, except that we have to backfill their positions when they're gone. So we're paying overtime for someone to do their job while they go get this prisoner. We have hotel costs, we have airline costs, and then we have the airline cost of the subject coming back as well.
Sure.
And so depending on where that person's at, it could be $1,000, it could be $4,000. A lot of times they seem to go to like Florida, maybe because it's warm.
Well, I mean, a Florida man.
It costs us $4,000 to bring them back here to Idaho.
Sure.
Now, there's a couple of different thoughts, is that if they're not in the state of Idaho, let them be Florida's problem. They're not our problem.
Sure.
You know, it'd be cheaper that way. But that really goes against holding people accountable.
Yeah.
If you want to hold people accountable, then they need to come back and face the consequences of not following the rules. And
it's almost like just pay them. Here's a ticket to Florida.
You know, it'd probably be easier and cheaper, but it's not necessarily the right thing to do.
The right
so
thing
you've seen some states that have actually put warrants in the system that says we'll only come after them if they're in state, or we'll only come after them if they're surrounding states. And the reason why they do that is it's cheaper. It's easier for us to get that person back to our state at a much cheaper rate. If you have to go statewide, or not statewide, United States wide, then it costs a lot more money. And that's where we're facing. And so we put together a bill that said that the state would then be responsible to pick up that tab. The sheriffs would still do it. It's our responsibility. We'll go do it. But it's a state inmate that's not following state rules. And so we think the state should pay for it. Now, what I recently found is that the Parole Commission, and the Parole Commission is completely separate from Department of Corrections. The Parole Commission pays a third-party company to go get their people that abscond the state, and I think they said they pay about $180,000 a year. And so if someone doesn't follow the rules that are on parole, then the state will pay to bring them back. So if that state agency is doing what they should be doing, why isn't the other state agency? And of course the answer is because it's always been that way. Unacceptable answer. And so
we're not a population of 1 million under people anymore.
So we put together a bill. We had success. It passed the House unanimously. It was facing an upcoming hearing that was scheduled on the Senate side. Looked like it was going to go forward there too. Weren't having any issues at all. And then we got a call from the governor's office that wanted to meet and says, hey, we think we have a solution to fix this problem without a new bill. And we said, well, we'll listen to you because
of course. Solutions are
there's so many darn bills that come out every year. We don't need another bill on the books.
Yeah.
And so we actually ended up with our sheriff lobbyist, our legislative chairman for the Sheriffs Association, aide in the governor's office, and the IDOC director at the time, who's the former director. They all met and says, hey, I think there's a way for us for you to submit these bills to the Board of Examiners. The Board of Examiners can then approve these bills and we can reimburse you. Would you be willing to consider that and drop the bill? And we said, as a courtesy to the governor, heck yeah, we'd be willing to do that. Well, here we are 2 years later, and we're not any closer to having that situation resolved. In fact, we just had a meeting last week with the Board of Examiners with the designees of the groups that make that up, because I believe it's the governor's office and the Secretary of State's office, and there's one other entity that make up the Board of Examiners. And they go, what is this? This isn't, we're not familiar with this.
Like square one.
Well, unfortunately, the aide in the governor's office has left. The director of IDOC that was present during that meeting has left. And now we're stuck with this going, well, this is what we were told 2 years ago, and this is what we're trying to do today. but we're not any closer to getting this resolved. So I'm going to go down in an hour here and pitch it to the sheriffs to dust off that bill and run that bill again in 2026. And when they say, why are we doing that? And say, well, we tried this 2 years ago, and this is where we're at today.
You had it up to the finish line.
And we're still paying, that figure is hundreds of thousands of dollars that the counties are paying to bring back state inmates to Idaho. And so we want to get that resolved.
That's state level issues that are impacting counties and counties' pockets.
That is our opinion. There's some other opinions out there that says, well, that's not our responsibility.
I'm saying that more general about our whole conversation over all of the issues, right?
Well, and the bottom line is it's a justifiable cost. The thing is, who's going to pay for it? Sure. That's really what it is.
It's certainly it seems very challenging. And I just say what comes to my mind. It's like, we do a census every 10 years or what have you. And it's, if the sheriffs are an investment for Idaho and safety and security, then it seems to me every 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, there should be some patented analysis of the sheriff system and its costs. And the state should speak to that every 10 years or something like that. Like, it would not just analyze the 911 system or this little system or that little system. It's like the whole system as a whole. And this is what was discovered. And maybe we can't fix it all, but we might want to think about addressing the top two issues or some kind of issues that way. That's just my opinion. It should be a part of the process.
Well, and Dylan, I totally agree with you. I can't claim that I'm an Idaho native. I've only been here half my life. I've been here 30 years. And so I'm a semi-native, I guess. But when I came here to this state, there was like 1.1 million people in this state. And now we got 1.9 million. Yep. And I am told that in a short period of time, just the Treasure Valley alone, we're going to have 1 million people. That puts a burden on public safety. Certainly. And unfortunately, public safety is necessary. And public safety is expensive. And
Absolutely.
We need to.
And the expectations are increasing daily about how we do it.
They are. Right? I know what my expectations are. I'm sure I know what your expectations are when it comes to criminal activity.
Because when seconds count, the police are only minutes away, right?
Yep.
I really want to thank you for coming on the show today, Jeff. As you're a representative of an entire organization of sheriffs, there's certainly a lot of pitfalls for communicating about what and how and what it is. And it's with great respect. I hope that your communication with your sheriffs today, as you're going to go and meet and organize, is what looks to be a professional approach to just getting some resolve. This is Dylan Stalker, The Great Idaho Show. Don't forget our sponsors, Jeff. I can see you there. It's Old Arms of Idaho. Don't forget it. They are your ambassadors to America's heritage. Go to thegreatidahoshow.com and hear this anytime.